The cat and I have been busy in the studio making this. And these are all the steps it takes for me to get from a basic felt hood to a winter hat. The very first thing I always do is start designing my hat. Rather than diving straight in there, I make sure I understand the kind of brim that I want, what my crown is going to be like, and that always helps me make sure I am choosing the perfect blocks right at the beginning, rather than regretting a choice later on. For this one, I'm just choosing a dome crown and a beautiful, simple, flat brim block so that I've got some options later on. The next thing I do is always make sure my blocks are wrapped so that I can easily get my hats back on and off them before I spray my crown and start there. I'm going to get it on my steamer, making sure that I'm getting the steam evenly around that hat so that when I pull it on the block, it's going to stretch evenly. So while it looks like I'm not actually putting a lot of effort into this, I'm pulling really firmly on the front, the back, and both the sides to make sure that I am stretching beautifully around the hat. And I just keep going till it's absolutely perfect. But I don't always get it first go. Sometimes I've got just a bit more movement left in that crown. So I get it off the block, put it back on the steamer, moving around and making sure I'm getting it all evenly on there, moving it around all the time, and then I'm going to pop it back on the block and stretch it again. You might even find you need to do it another couple of times to get as much out of that felt as you can. Again, always make sure you're working front to back, side to side, and don't use your fingers. They can rip your felt. So use those heels of your hands to really get kind of over your hat and much stretch out of it that you can. You want to make sure that your hat is going to dry beautifully. Grab your blocking cord, make sure it's something with no stretch and no movement in it, and wrap it really tightly exactly where you want the collar of your hat to start, so where the brim starts. Pin it down and leave it to dry. Now that my crown is perfectly dry, I'm going to take it off its block and get started on creating the brim for this hat. The first thing I'm going to do is just dampen the underneath of my felt a little bit before I carefully put it back on my block and secure it there. I just used the same cord that I used when I was blocking that crown to get it securely back on my brim block so that when I'm pulling it into shape, it's held there really securely. I don't tend to use my steamer when I'm blocking a brim, and that's because I just can't control the steam enough and I don't want to damage that beautiful crown that I've already blocked. So what I do is wet my pressing cloth, grab my iron, and use steam that I'm pressing through the felt to start making it softer so that I can begin to stretch it over my brim block. When I start to stretch it, I make sure that I'm not pulling that crown too much, and I'm always working front to back and then side to side, the same way that I did with the crown, to make sure that I'm stretching it evenly and not pulling the crown through. So I'm just easing it from as close to the crown as I can get and then kind of rolling it over the edge of my block using my thumbs. I'm going to work all the way around the hat, but making sure I'm going front to back, side to side, so that it's all beautifully even and I'm not going to warp that beautiful crown. Once I've got it all on my block, I just want to make sure it's pinned securely so that it dries evenly and doesn't start to shrink back and I end up with an unevenly blocked crown. Now that my brim is dry and off the block, I need to mark both where my wire is going to sit and where I'm going to cut my edge so that I can roll it over. So I just measure both of those out with some tailor's chalk. And then I nick into my brim, cutting smoothly around it so that I have the perfect edge for me to roll over. My big tip when I'm wiring the edge of a hat is to, rather than sew it in one long strip, is actually measure it out, make sure it's perfect, join it together so you've got a circle, and then blanket stitch it in so it can't move around. This is going to help you shape your hat as you wear it and keep it looking just perfect. Now that my brim is beautifully wired, I need to start rolling over my edge. So the first thing I do is bring a stitch up through the edge of my felt, right where I cut it, and then grab a little bit of the felt that is on the body of the hat. And that is going to start rolling my edge over so that it looks like a soft rolled edge, not a hard pressed one. No stitches visible on the outside, and when I roll this, almost no stitches visible on the inside either. I like to stiffen my hats as late in the process as possible, so I've left it to just before I put my head lining into my hat. Once you let it dry for a little while, pin in your head lining, which you've cut to exactly the head measurement that your hat is supposed to be. And again, work evenly. Pin it center back, center front, and both of the sides so that you know that your headband's in there evenly and it's not going to warp your hat, but instead hold it beautifully secure. I always think a hat should look as good on the inside as it does on the outside. So when I'm stitching this in, I'm going to catch down my center back bit so that it looks neat and tidy with just one little stitch that goes over. And then I'm going to have pin stitches on the inside and a slightly longer stitch sitting just on the outside of my hat. It's going to end up being covered by my trims. We're now up to the last step, and I'm just lightly pinning my headband around my hat so that it looks like it's just landed there. A couple of pins is all I need to secure it before I just lightly stitch it down. Now that that's stitched down there, it's time to think about my next step. And I'm just really going to use this beautiful soft ribbon again, tie it in a knot, and then also just carefully place that on the hat. Making sure I get it in the perfect position, all I'm going to do is place 4 separate pins that are kind of one at each corner of the center of the bow or the knot, just to hold it there. What I want is to look like the trim landed there rather than like I've hammered it down with a bunch of nails. Once I've got all of these pins in place, all I do, add a couple of little pin stitches, and that is my trim done. It means it looks great, it looks really soft, but I can also easily remove it if I want to change up this hat and do something else with it. The very last thing I need to do is cut off my ribbons, give my hat a little bit of a brush, and it's ready to go. If you liked this video, make sure you save it or like it, and if you want more millinery content, subscribe to the channel.